This short video is about the Pathfinder Office portion of Lab 7 in ESBM 30, 31, and 5031. Now this assumes you've collected the data with the Juno into a rover for the point line and polygon for the WAS and the point line and polygon for the non-WAS, for the corrected and uncorrected point line and polygon. And so I've got the no WAS and I've got the with SBA, and here I'm using SBA. I probably should say with WAS, no WAS, but SBA and WAS are synonyms. It's satellite-based augmentation. It's sort of the generic term, and WAS is the name of the U.S. satellite-based augmentation. And I've got it spelled wrong here. It should be WAAS, WAS. So you'd select those and you'd copy them to your share drive, and you'd put them in your share drive wherever you, and I've put them in lab, and I've put them into separate folders just to keep them straight for the output. So here's the data that I copied, and I've set up separate folders for the output for my processing. So I have a place to put the results when I've transferred this data. Okay, so now what we need to do is start Pathfinder Office, and starting Pathfinder Office is down under the T's, unfortunately, because it's made by a company named Trimble, and it's T, Pathfinder Office, and it sets up on your computer and looks like this when it's starting up. Takes a few minutes. Now, the first thing you want to always do in Pathfinder Office is to make sure that you set the project and the location where you're going to be working. So we would always do File, Project, and we would do New, and and we would create something. So we'd do something like this. We'd say New. We'd give it a name. I'd call it Lab 7, and we could say something like Lab 7 Andy or something, whatever you want to. And now this is the important part. This is the place where you tell it where you want the data to go, and obviously you want that to go to your share drive. And here I'm putting it in, I'm going to be putting it in Andy, and I've already got the base back and export there for it. But we'd be putting it in the Andy folder, right? So I'm putting my work in the Andy folder, and it'll be creating those. And there already exists, so I'm going to use it. So now I've got my project set up. Now, almost all of the work in Pathfinder Office goes on in the utilities. We transfer data in, we correct data, we'll do that in later labs, and we export. But this lab we're going to do data transfer, we're going to do export, okay? So we first do data transfer. Now, this is a little tricky because we're picking the information up from those data files, the little pieces of the data file that we had copied from the chip to your share space. So what you need to do is you ignore this for the moment. We have to click this first, all right? And then we have to click New, all right? And then we have to click GIS folder, and we say OK. And then we've got to browse for the folder where we put our data. And here I'm putting it on the share and Andy, and the data where I put the data was in Lab 7 data. Okay, so that's where I'm doing next. Now we have to always say TerraSync. We leave this as the default. We say next, and that's the name. I'll just give it the name, and so that's the one we're going to use. And it gives the last one. It shows up here. Shows it's connected. So then I click on Add. And I'm going to add the data files. You can see there's my no SBAS and my with, and it took all those little pieces of files that were made up of the little pieces of a TerraSync file, because they're a cluster of files, and it's bringing them together into an SSF file is what we're doing here in this process. A single file that's used in Pathfinder Office. So it's going to go to Andy. In the type, I'm going to select both these and send these over. Now, we could do this one at a time. We could say, for example, no SBA. We could put that into lab data. We could put that into the output of the no SBA. You getting the idea? So I've got So I'm putting that into the no, right? So I'm moving that. So I'd open that and I'd transfer that. Okay, so I put that into I'm keeping my folders separate so I don't get confused. So I close. Now I'm going to do the add again data. Now this I'll do the one with SBA, and here I'm going to put that into the Lab 7 data, the one that has with the WAS or the SBA. So then I open and then I transfer all. So now I've brought those over and they now have become SSF files. So if I go look at those folder locations in my non-SBA, I see a no SBA there. So that got moved over and now it's a single file. It's an SSF file. It's actually now become a Pathfinder Office file, not a TerraSync file, not a cluster of little TerraSync files that make up a rover, the details of what's in a rover, but it's an SSF file. I got the same one here, and I'm keeping them separate, so it's a little easier for me to think about things. Now, generally what I do is take a look at my data and see what's going on. And so what I'd like to do here is that I would go to open, and I keep the map open, and I can show you where the map is if we want. We view map, we turn the map on. So we'd open, and we could open one, this is our with SBA, okay? So that's the corrected one. So you can see that, and I could also open the other one, which would be in the other folder. So I'd open that, I take a look to see, and I see that. So it looks like things are there. There is ways to take a look at the data, a little more detail of the data. You could turn on these little windows that actually show you some information about these. So we could click here and you'd see the name of it, the manhole. You could see the name here, the sidewalk. You could see the block, see the coordinates. So you can check your information and take a look at it. Now, we're going to use the utilities to actually export this. Now this is a little tricky, so we got to work on it. And I'm going to do one at a time, so they go they're separate, so I don't get confused. So I'm going to do the no SBA first, and I'm going to browse to where I want that to be, and that's going to be on the my Andy here, and I'm going to put that into Lab 7 data. And this is the no SBA, so I'm going to put it in here, that no, I'm putting it in that folder. And I could put it inside the subfolder if I wanted to, but at least I'm keeping it separate, the output. Now, we have to pick this as a shapefile. This is important. This is not the default, so you got to make sure you change that to a shapefile. Now, the important thing is we keep track of what our coordinate system is. We can, if we send it out as lat long WGS84, we got to make sure we put the right projection on it. We could change that if we wish, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, now we do the properties. Properties, we have to do use the output, and we always want to be using each input file, create a subfolder of the same name. We always want that bottom one. The attributes, we always want to check everything just to make sure we get all the data coming out. Units doesn't really matter. Position filter does. You have to make sure there's a check in this. The default is unchecked, so you got to make sure that's checked. Coordinate system. Now here's the coordinate system. If we leave it in the lat long WGS84 the way we picked it up on the rover, we have to make sure we put the right projection file. And the projection files are all on the ESPM 3031, 5031 under coordinates convert, and here I have to make sure I've got the right projection file. Now, if I change the output coordinate, I could change this to something. I could change this to UTM, for example. I could run down and change it to UTM, right? And I could say the con US cores 96, or I could put it into the plane, the con US, which is the regular one. Whatever you do, whichever you send it out, you better make sure the projection matches it. So if you're putting it in UTM cores 96 here, if you're putting it in the plane core NAT 83, here's the projection file. So that is essential. I get a number of students that have trouble with that. They have to match. And so we're going to, let's see, now I'm going to say use the current coordinate system, and I'll just send it out as lat long WGS84, and we'll change it later on the map. But you can see this matches that. So then we go to OK, and now everything's all set to go. So we say OK, and files may be overwritten. So I send it out, and now we've got those files set out. So we've got the shape files sent out, and we've got point. Our points are called point GE, our lines are called line GE, and the area is GE. And that's the default names of any point or any line. So you could have called this manhole, but it's listed as point right at this point. It's got an attribute inside it that says manhole, but right now it's generic. And that's why we have to keep the WAS and the non-WAS in separate folders, because you don't want two files with the same point GE. The way they default to that default name. So we've got that set, and now we go through that same process for the exporting, and we go through, in this case, we browse and we go up and we make sure we do the output, we do the with, okay, and we do the same sort of process. This time we put it into a different folder. We put it in the folder for with. So I hope you get the idea, and this should help for you. Thank you very much.